End of the call. Hello? You can come over. I noticed the video call hadn't ended completely. As I tried to end it, my husband was making a call to someone. I found his overly familiar demeanor puzzling. Peeking with my in-laws, I witnessed an unexpected move by my husband. My name is Catherine Johnson. I'm a 36-year-old housewife. Currently, I live with my in-laws and our 3 children. My husband was assigned overseas for 3 years, and I was apprehensive about raising the children alone during this period. I worried about potential illnesses or injuries. After discussing my concerns with my husband, we decided to move in with my in-laws. My husband, Bob, and I have been classmates, dating since high school. I've known my in-laws since then. We decided to marry once we were financially stable after graduating from college, and we got married when I was 24. Bob wanted to support the family soon, so he joined a large company. He was ambitious and was highly regarded even though he had just started. Therefore, we were able to get married sooner than planned. Both our parents looked forward to our wedding. They were delighted at our ceremony. Both families got along well, having interactions even before our marriage, feeling just like one big family. Both parents were very pleased with our wedding, and whenever I remember the ceremony, it brings back happy memories. On my side, aside from my parents, I have an older brother, 3 years my senior. He lives far away, and we occasionally meet. He sees Bob as a real younger brother, and they've been close since school. They both played sports in school and even enjoy watching games together. When our children were born, he was thrilled, always bringing gifts. Such a caring brother. However, tragedy struck when our parents passed away in an accident shortly after our first child was born. The last time I saw them, they were gleaming with joy, eagerly waiting to see their grandchild grow. Their faces, full of hope for the future and believing in continued happiness, is my last memory of them. I had always looked forward to doing things with my parents and my newborn child. But, just as they were in such high spirits, they were taken from me suddenly in an accident. Preparing for their funeral with my older brother, I was so shocked that I felt numb for quite a while. While preparing for the funeral with my brother, I was in shock for a while. My memories of that period are blurry. During the funeral, I was naturally overwhelmed by a sense of loss. I remember weeping quietly, with tears streaming down my face non-stop. My brother desperately tried to comfort me as I grieved deeply, but I felt like I wasn't truly present. Even after the funeral, it was my husband, Bob, who supported me. Even though Bob was close with my parents and grieved their loss, and despite his busy work schedule and taking care of our child, he was there for me. Seeing how Bob handled everything, I realized I couldn't stay like this and began to slowly recover. When I apologized for the burden I had placed on him during that time, Bob just laughed. Couples are there to support each other during tough times. It's a given for me to be there for you, Catherine. It's only natural to put on a brave face for our family even if it's hard, said Bob. Inspired by Bob's attitude, I vowed to do my best for our family. My in-laws, knowing how devastated I was during that period, became even more concerned about me. Catherine, we consider you our very own daughter. Please, don't hesitate to rely on us. We're here to help and support you anytime, they would tell me. Knowing them, I was reassured that living together would be worry-free. So, we canceled our apartment contract, completed the necessary paperwork to transfer our child's preschool, and moved into my in-laws' home. Our kids are attached to their grandparents, so we changed preschools for them to live together, but they didn't seem to mind. The house is a 2-story owned property that Bob had built when he was young. It was designed to be child-friendly and to be their residence in their old age, with attention to accessibility, making it a safe home for small children. The house is slightly bigger than our previous apartment, and given our young kids, moving in didn't pose any problems. Our old apartment wasn't 2-story, so initially, the kids found the stairs fascinating and often played on them together. I was concerned about how the change in environment might affect them, but seeing them play so energetically eased my worries. Even though they had to switch preschools, they seemed to adjust well and made new friends quickly. Though I was anxious they might follow from the changes, they've been healthy, which puts me at ease. Ever since we moved to New York, we've been living harmoniously with my in-laws, supporting one another. At first, since I was a stay-at-home mom, I intended to handle all the household chores. However, my in-laws proposed we share the responsibilities. While I took care of preparing meals, my mother-in-law did the laundry, though sometimes we'd switch roles. Apparently, she's not great at cooking, so she was relieved, and she even complimented my dishes. The house cleaning was shared between my in-laws and me, freeing up more of my time. I now get to spend more time with my kids, and I believe I've become more attuned to their subtle changes. The only issue, if it can be called that, is the kids missing their playtime with Bob. They adore him, and whenever he had time, he used to dote on them a lot. Despite his tiring job, Bob would sometimes tell me to take a break and handle some chores. He works hard, both at his job and with the kids, so much that I sometimes worried if he was resting enough. Even though you work and handle house chores, are you sure you're getting enough rest? When I asked Bob this, he assured me he was fine. Bob is gentle, family-oriented, and has a bright and cheerful demeanor. Being overseas, it's not so easy to travel back and forth, and in the span of 3 years, he only came back to the States once. Video calls with Bob while he's on his overseas assignment are something my kids and I really look forward to. With a 14-hour time difference, finding a common time can be tricky, but we try to video call at least once a month. We also exchange emails regularly, but nothing beats seeing each other's faces. We're always curious about his life abroad and want to ensure he's okay. Recently, the kids have grown more interested in the glimpses of foreign settings and Bob's stories during these calls. Today at 9 p.m., we're scheduled for a video call with Bob. The kids, eager to talk to their father, have even taken naps to ensure they stay awake. As I set up the computer for the call, the kids line up properly and soon start a lively conversation with Bob. "Been a while, how've you been?" When Bob's face appeared on the screen and I called out to him, the kids responded with joyous voices. "Hey, Dad. We're doing good. Guess what?" They began, animatedly using their hands to emphasize their points. Bob listened with a delighted expression. I had so much I wanted to discuss with Bob, but I decided to wait until the kids were asleep. My in-laws and I watched the conversation with warm smiles. Bob mentioned he had work later, but it sounded like he had about 2 hours to spare. After the kids, I was hoping to have some one-on-one time with my husband. Thanks to the consistent help from my in-laws, there were things difficult to discuss or issues I had been facing that I really wanted to share with Bob. About 30 minutes into the video call, perhaps because of their energetic chatter, the kids began to look sleepy. Even though they had taken a nap, it was around their usual bedtime, so they were likely tired. Yet, they seemed to still have more to say and were trying their best to stay awake. The youngest is mostly asleep, occasionally jolting awake, but quickly succumbing to drowsiness again. Seeing them in such a state, Bob gently suggested they go to bed. "Getting sleepy, huh? Just 1 more month and Dad'll be coming back to New York. We'll chat loads then." Bob's overseas assignment was coming to an end in a month. The kids were eagerly awaiting his return, but they still seemed to have so much to say. "Remember, you have school and preschool tomorrow. Let's call it a night." My in-laws and I also persuaded the kids, and soon they were off to bed. As the drowsy kids waved goodbye, Bob waved back. As I stood to take the kids to their rooms, my in-laws quietly offered, "You two probably have a lot to talk about. Leave the kids with us and take your time." Holding our youngest, who had fallen asleep, my in-laws walked the other kids to their room by the hand. Grateful for my mother-in-law's words, I settled in to chat with Bob. Even in just a month, it's easy to notice how much kids grow. When it came to talking about the kids, the topics were endless. At the parent-teacher conference, they seemed to be having a great time. When the teacher asked them a question, they answered confidently. They proudly told me all about it afterwards. It was adorable. Ever since our eldest started elementary school, with Bob being overseas, he's always looked forward to attending those conferences. I've been sending pictures regularly, but he always wants a detailed account during our calls. Seeing how much Bob values our family and takes joy in the kids' milestones always reminds me of how fortunate I am to have married such a wonderful man, and I cherish our current happiness. Besides updates about the kids, we also discussed some challenges, concerns, and future plans. After a while, my in-laws joined back in our conversation. Before we knew it, it was midnight. Bob had work to start, and we had an early day ahead, so we wrapped up the call. "Good night. You have work now, so take care," I said. Intending to end the call, I mistakenly only turned off my camera, leaving the call still active. Realizing I hadn't fully disconnected, my drowsy brain scrambled to properly end the call. "Call's over. Hello? I'm done with the family call. You can come over now." Then, without noticing the computer screen, Bob started making a call to someone. He had said he was about to get ready for work, but now he's inviting someone over? Moreover, the way he spoke was quite friendly, giving me an uneasy feeling and making me hesitant to end it. It felt not just friendly, but there was a kind of sweetness as if he was speaking to a lover. "What's going on?" Noticing my reaction, my in-laws asked, curious. "I thought he was heading to work, but it seems like he invited someone over. It's bothering me." I felt guilty about eavesdropping, even though he's my husband, but I told them I just wanted to check who was coming. Seeing Bob's behavior on the phone, it seemed like my mother-in-law felt the same way and agreed with me. So we decided to watch together. Although I had a bad feeling, I reassured myself thinking, maybe he's just close with a coworker, and I'm overthinking this. However, a foreign woman walked into the house, chatting familiarly with Bob and even touching him. No matter the cultural differences between the US and other countries, you wouldn't just invite a woman into your home or be this intimate. I instinctively looked at my in-laws, and both had a grim expression. They murmured in disbelief, watching the video as if seeing something inexplicable. But just as I thought maybe I was overreacting and it was just cultural differences, the two clearly began to engage in infidelity. "Wait, what?" Seeing Bob's shocking behavior, I was more calm than angry and quickly pressed the record button. My in-laws had a mix of guilt towards me and anger towards Bob on their faces. "Catherine, are you okay? You don't have to watch this if it's too hard," my mother-in-law said, concerned about me who was visibly shaking. Even in this situation, the care from my in-laws brought some comfort. "I need to see this for evidence." "I'm fine," I assured her and continued to watch. While I felt disgusted and angry about being cheated on, I was surprisingly calm. After the appalling act, the two began to talk on the bed. From their conversation, it was evident that the woman knew Bob was married, and it seemed to be a relationship limited to his time abroad. "Thanks for taking me on that trip the other time." "No problem. Thanks to your guidance, I had a great time." It turned out Bob had taken the woman on a trip recently. The destination was a place our kids had expressed interest in and we had talked about visiting as a family someday. And since they had no acquaintances abroad, they seemed to have enjoyed their trip without any inhibitions. "But you covered the expenses, right? Is the money okay?" The woman spoke worriedly about money, seeming nervous about her affair being discovered. Unbelievably, Bob had been telling me he earned less than he actually did, and he had confided in me that he had been spending the extra on his leisure. Apparently, his company has 2 payroll locations. With this shocking revelation, all of Bob's past actions started to seem suspicious. My trust in Bob seemed to shatter audibly. By the time I finished observing Bob's behavior, it was past 2 a.m. Stunned by the shocking truth, the 3 of us were speechless. "Let's get some sleep for now, and then think about what's next," my father-in-law muttered, and we decided to head to our bedrooms. Once in bed, I was wide awake, unable to sleep. Bob had always been caring, proactive in work and childcare, and kind. We've known each other since high school, so I thought I understood him pretty well. I never thought that the Bob I knew was a lie, but with recent events, I felt I no longer knew him. I had always believed he'd never cheat, and if it were just eyewitness accounts or photos, I probably wouldn't have believed he was having an affair. But having seen the scene on a video call, I was in shock and my thoughts were frozen, but gradually various emotions towards Bob began to well up. I found myself wiping away tears that wouldn't stop flowing. Knowing I had to be up early, I tried to sleep, but my mind kept returning to Bob, and my drowsiness vanished. Before I knew it, it was morning, and I hadn't slept a wink. I used makeup to hide the redness around my eyes from crying, and started preparing for the day. "Good morning, breakfast is ready." I called out cheerfully to my children, trying to act as usual. "Mom, are you okay? Your eyes are red. Are you all right?" I had tried to act strong in front of the kids, but they looked worried. I couldn't hide my bloodshot eyes and had caused them concern. "It's okay, honey. I just stayed up late last night, so I might be a bit tired." "Oh, Mom. You gotta get proper sleep," I replied with a smile, and the kids mimicked my tone, saying the same thing, and laughed, looking relieved. After seeing off the kids, I decided to take a break because my in-laws were concerned. Maybe because I had moved around to prepare for the kids' morning, this time I fell asleep instantly. I wished that the events of the night had just been a dream, and as I lay down, my consciousness faded instantly. I had planned to rest for a short while but ended up sleeping until the evening. My father-in-law had picked up the kids from kindergarten, and my mother-in-law had prepared dinner. "I'm so sorry for sleeping so much." "Thank you." I apologized as I immediately helped my mother-in-law and carried on as usual. When night fell and the kids were asleep, I spoke to my in-laws about my thoughts on the future. "I don't think I can live with Bob anymore. So, I'm considering getting a divorce." At first, I was shocked and bewildered, but I couldn't see myself forgiving a husband like Bob, who could lie like that. I felt bad for my kind in-laws, but I couldn't imagine continuing my marriage with Bob. "We're truly sorry for what our son has done. We're truly sorry." My in-laws seemed remorseful about Bob's actions and offered to help with the divorce proceedings. And Bob would be returning from abroad in a month, so I decided to quickly prepare everything by then. The next day, I immediately consulted with a lawyer known for handling infidelity and divorce cases. Also, Bob was quite active on social media, posting about his life abroad. He had been posting photos from overseas, and our kids enjoyed seeing them. I thought he might be careful about it, but since his partner seemed to be a foreigner, I thought there might be some clues on his social media. So I checked. After investigating, I found the woman he was seeing and hired a private investigator to identify her. Turns out, she worked at the same company as Bob and was a local employee there. So, I explained the situation to Bob's company and asked for their cooperation. Bob had always been a straight shooter, so they didn't believe it initially. However, after showing them the video evidence, they understood and offered their support. I also informed my brother and some close friends about the whole thing. Everyone was skeptical at first, but after showing them the video, they all sided with me. "That guy, even with a family, what was he thinking, betraying like that?" Especially my brother, who was close to Bob and trusted him with me, was quite furious. Though it was just a month's time, being a homemaker gave me the flexibility to prepare, and with the video evidence at hand, I managed to get everything ready for the divorce. With the support of my in-laws and by splitting up the necessary tasks, we managed to finish everything before Bob's return. However, explaining to the kids was a real challenge. They were attached to Bob and were eagerly waiting for his return. If I didn't tell them we won't see him anymore, even after the divorce, they might still want to live with him. But, considering their young age, I softly explained the situation with Bob and managed to convince them that we couldn't live with him any longer. "Your dad, you see, he told us a very bad lie. And I just can't forgive him. So we can't live with him anymore." "Really? Well, okay then." Since Bob had been away on work abroad before, they thought it was just another one of those times. They'll probably understand better as they grow. For now, they seem to accept the fact that they won't be living with Bob. Having finished all the preparations, I invited the newly returned Bob for a meal, saying it's been a while. I told him to meet at a private dining room in a restaurant. To Bob's surprise, not just me and the in-laws, but also some company executives and a lawyer were present in the room. By the way, my kids were with my brother, who feared he might hit Bob if he saw him. "What's going on? Why are all these people here?" In front of all these unexpected faces, Bob asked with a puzzled look. The lawyer began explaining about his infidelity and the divorce. "I haven't cheated. There must be some mistake," Bob vehemently denied, acting like a victim. Even when confronted with photos of the other woman, he insisted they were just colleagues and she was simply helping him adjust to life abroad. My husband desperately tried to explain himself, and had I not known any better, I might have thought it was all a misunderstanding. Seeing Bob lie so effortlessly, a chill ran down my spine. "You still say the same after seeing this?" Losing patience, my father-in-law, trying to keep his anger in check, showed the video evidence. Bob, clearly agitated, started to panic. "How did you get this? I didn't think I was being filmed." His employers then told him they couldn't trust him anymore and notified him of his termination. My in-laws were furious with Bob, my husband, and confronted him. "No, family is everything. Trust me, I'm not gonna get a divorce." I looked at Bob coolly, wondering what he was trying to say now. "We'll discuss the divorce in detail later," I calmly said that to a flustered Bob and left the room. That night, Bob, hoping to talk to me, came to the house where we had lived with my in-laws. However, my children and I had already moved out. Through connections from my father-in-law, we were introduced to a secure and comfortable property, and we had moved immediately. I didn't want to see Bob anymore, so I made a snap decision to move. I felt guilty about having to change schools and daycares for the kids, but they seemed fine with it, which was a relief. Bob came over and wanted to know where our new place was, but my in-laws firmly refused to tell him and gave him a piece of their mind. Bob apparently left after that. He kept sending persistent messages afterward, but I only responded about the divorce mediation and ignored the rest. He kept sending messages full of excuses. It was annoying, thinking if he didn't want this, he shouldn't have cheated in secret. Furthermore, my mother-in-law informed me that a neighbor had spotted Bob near the school and kindergarten. He was probably waiting outside to catch a glimpse of our kids and talk to me. Hearing this, I was relieved we had moved to a distant area. A few days later, at the divorce mediation, Bob had lawyered up well, and we finalized the divorce smoothly. I claimed a portion of our assets and gained custody of all 3 kids. It was also decided I would receive child support. Bob pleaded, "Please don't divorce me. I'll never cheat again. I've been good till now, right? Give me another chance. It was just a lapse in judgment." But it was too late. "You enjoyed yourself abroad without me. I don't want to see your face anymore." Bob tried to cling, but I had no trust left for him and brushed him off coldly. However, he insisted on seeing the kids periodically. I didn't want them to meet Bob, but he does have the right to see them post-divorce, and if the kids wanted to, I felt it would be cruel to stop them. So, we decided that whenever Bob meets the kids, my in-laws or my brother would be present. After the divorce, Bob, not giving up, asked friends to mediate, playing the victim. However, since I had explained the situation to them in advance, they refused him. If I hadn't informed them, they might have felt sorry for Bob, leading to further issues. I was truly glad I had informed those around me about everything. Bob was once seen as a diligent worker and a loving father. But now, everyone knew about his lies and infidelity. He had no allies. His friends distanced themselves, my in-laws kept their distance, and Bob became increasingly isolated. Currently, Bob has almost run out of savings, and he has child support to pay, so he's been working non-stop. Because his previous professional circle knows about his actions, he's taken a full-time job in a different field. He's also juggling multiple part-time jobs. In the beginning, he was excited to see the kids, but as they grew, they understood what he had done, and the meetings became less frequent. I'm not sure about his mistress since she's abroad, but I heard she received a warning from her employer. She's still overseas, so I hope at the very least she's learned her lesson about getting involved with a married man. Life after the divorce is comfortable with the asset division and child support. Considering my children's future, I started working again. It was tough on my own, but with my brother's help, I managed to raise them well. Currently, I live on my own in a town a bit away from the city, where it's not too inconvenient. Since I've shifted to remote work, I spend a lot of time at home. Now that my children have grown and moved out, I have more free time. I'm enjoying a relaxed life gardening. Occasionally, my children visit with my grandchildren. I look forward to treating them to meals I've prepared, savoring my peaceful retirement. From now on, we are supporting my mom and sister. If you don't like it, then I'm gonna divorce you. Why do I have to be kicked out of the house? I can't possibly agree with what my husband suddenly brought up, and his sister is an absolute monster. Living with someone like her would surely drive me insane. I tried everything in my power to avoid living together, but my pleas fell on deaf ears, and in the end, he threatened me with divorce. But I'm not someone who gives up easily. Now that it has come to this, I want to get a grip on his vulnerabilities and make him regret. It seems he's hiding something from me, but if he thinks he can keep it a secret and have his way, he's sorely mistaken. My name is Linda Hernandez. I'm a 38-year-old working housewife, and we've been married for 2 years. We don't have kids yet, but we both want them soon. Ever since I graduated from a community college, I've been working full-time at a general hospital, but I've cut back on my hours to undergo fertility treatments. Currently, I'm working part-time only in the mornings at a nearby private clinic, but I have concerns. The concerns I'm troubled with. The worries I'm holding on to are about the fertility treatment and my husband, Jake. I fell head over heels for Jake, who works smoothly in sales at an insurance company, and that led to our marriage. We both had a mutual desire to have children. A home filled with the laughter of children is so appealing, don't you think? I've always wanted kids, but I'm getting on in years. Don't be so downhearted. We'll have them in no time. Jake seemed to think that we'd naturally have kids without any effort, but reality isn't that easy. 2 years have passed, and there's still no sign of us having a child. I discussed the treatment with Jake, but his response was unexpected. Do we really need to go to a clinic? I mean, you hear about celebrities having babies in their 40s. Why not let nature take its course? I want to do everything possible. You said you wanted children too, didn't you? It's not like we're sick or anything, and it's gonna cost money. We're going to find out whether there's an issue or not. And if you're worried about money, I'll pay from my savings. Is that okay? Jake wasn't entirely convinced, but reluctantly agreed when I offered to cover the treatment costs from my pocket money. Fortunately, my parents also agreed to provide some financial assistance, which was a great relief. However, the situation was more serious than I thought, and it became challenging to continue working full-time while visiting the clinic. The doctor said I need to visit every 3 days. With work and all, it's gonna be tough. Well, you've come this far, and your parents are helping with the costs, right? So, it should be fine. Jake's response, which basically meant he was okay as long as it didn't affect his wallet, left a bad taste in my mouth. Still, I reassured myself, thinking that everything will turn around once we have a child. On a weekday when I had the day off from my part-time job, and Jake had gone to work, I enjoyed some rare alone time. Then, a call came in from an unfamiliar number. Picking up the phone, it was Jake's sister, Jennifer. Nevertheless, I wonder why the phone number has changed, it's a bit concerning. Did you change your number? I was surprised when an unknown number called. There were some reasons. Anyway, can I come over now? Is Jake at work? Jake isn't here on weekdays, but I'm off work. What time do you think you'll arrive? However, Jennifer started speaking without regard to my question. I have so much to talk to you about, Linda. Let's have a good girls' chat. I just wanted to know what time she'd be arriving, but she didn't answer that. Eventually, Jennifer arrived at my place right after I had taken a few bites of my lunch. So, muttering, I should have known, I hurriedly put the rest of my lunch back in the fridge. Welcome. If you'd told me when you were coming, I would have prepared lunch for you. I haven't had lunch yet. I'm starving. Oh, would you like me to make something? Jennifer quickly glanced at the kitchen shelf and waved her hand. On the shelf was a gift pound cake from a department store. It was a limited item, and I was looking forward to eating it as a treat on a special day. Nah, if I eat too much, I'll gain weight. But, I'm curious about this cake. Let's just have this for lunch. Where's the knife? Looking around the room for a knife to cut the pound cake, there was something slightly unsettling about Jennifer's behavior. I'll cut it. My place is a bit messy, and it's embarrassing if you look around too much. It's no big deal. It doesn't bother me. I'll cut a slice for you too, Linda. Saying that, she picked up the knife and began slicing the pound cake. I didn't have the energy to say anything. The thick, nearly 4-inch pound cake slice that Jennifer placed in front of me was so thin I could see through it. She immediately started talking again. Listen, recently my boyfriend's been a bit distant. Even though I tell him I want to see him, he's always making excuses, like work or his daughter. Really? Wait, he has a daughter? But I'm a girl too. It's lonely. He could pay a bit more attention to me. Engaging deeply in such conversations usually leads to even longer ones, which can be troublesome. In times like these, it's best to just keep nodding and smiling. This was one of the interpersonal skills I learned from my medical office job, but there was one thing Jennifer said that I couldn't ignore. He told me if we had a child together, he'd leave his current wife. Oh, is that so? The other day I felt something was off, so I went to the doctor, and turns out, I'm pregnant. I'm so happy. I wonder when's the best time to tell him. I nearly dropped my mug of tea. Pregnant? Wait a minute. He's married, has a kid, and you're pregnant? What's going on? He says he doesn't find his wife's daughter cute. That's why he wants to live with me and have a cute child that looks like me. You're kidding, right? Jennifer continued, puffing out her cheeks. He probably wants some time to convince his wife, right? Well, they say a kind woman needs peace of mind. I was rendered speechless for a moment by Jennifer's recklessness and the cruelty of her actions that could break a family apart. Go home. What? Why? It's getting dark outside, and I need my boyfriend to come pick me up. Oh, and I was curious about the tea from that department store in the cupboard. Please leave. I need a moment alone. To think that Jennifer would suddenly come over like a storm and then unload the bombshell of an affair and pregnancy, it's just too much. I've been going to the hospital wanting a child, taking medications I don't even want to, and yet, why is Jennifer, my sister-in-law who's having an affair, the one expecting? To begin with, I can't believe that someone in my family could easily engage in such a horrible act like an affair. My mind is a mess, to the point where I can't even explain it to myself. About a week after Jennifer's explosive visit, Jake came home unusually early from work. Oh, home on time today? You usually come back on the last train. That's rare. Jake, however, threw his bag onto the floor and came up to me, agitated. I heard from Jennifer. She said you said something terrible. I mean, she did come over the other day, but did I say something that bad? I began, but then realized she must be talking about the affair and pregnancy. But it was too late. 2 nights ago, Jennifer called me crying. As her brother, I can't just ignore her when she's upset. But, isn't it unreasonable to ask someone to keep silent after they've done something so wrong? What are you saying? My sister's gone off the rails? Come on, spill it. Both the affair and the pregnancy are such sensitive topics. Even if he's my husband, it's not easy to speak about, and Jennifer should explain herself. It wasn't my place to poke my nose in. Taking advantage of my silence, Jake continued to blame me. Let me guess, you're gonna say it's your hormones making you irritable. You always get emotional so easily. I wanted to retort that he was the one being emotional, but once it got to this point, Jake wasn't going to listen. My dear sister is being bullied. He's just fired up, thinking he's playing the hero, trying to protect her. Poor Jennifer. You better apologize to her. I didn't understand why I needed to apologize. But to prevent further complications, I decided to. I tried to apologize later on, but the conversation went nowhere that day. However, the next day, as if nothing had happened, Jennifer began calling and texting me. And she did it more often than before, which was quite a hassle. Sometimes, I couldn't reply during work, but if I left her messages unanswered, she'd complain to Jake. So, I would send a brief reply to keep the peace, but I wish she'd spare me from her gushing about her affair, day and night. I had talked to Jake about Jennifer a few times, but it was all in vain. Right now, Linda's pretty much a stay-at-home wife, so she could at least listen to Jennifer's stories. What, are you jealous because Jennifer got pregnant first? It's not like that. I'm busy too. If she expects an immediate response in the middle of the night, I end up losing sleep, sleep deprivation. But Jennifer was so happy, saying, I never thought Linda would be this easy to talk to. I really want her to listen. So, you should go along with it. Talking to Jake didn't resolve anything. Even as I'm lost in thought, the constant notifications from Jennifer never stop. What to do? But little did I know how naive I was to complain over calls and emails. I'd realized that later. About 2 months after discussing Jennifer's situation with Jake. The seasons were changing, and I thought about getting out some fall clothes. Just as I was about to get up, the doorbell rang. Did I order a package? Muttering to myself, I approached the front door only to be met with an unexpected sight. Massive cardboard boxes, like someone was moving, were being carried into the house one after another. The recipient's name was Jake, maybe it's work-related stuff? And Jake, the very person the packages were addressed to, neither contacted nor came home. I wish he'd communicate these things. After 3 days of no communication, he returned in the middle of the night, making a ruckus. Hey, I'm home! No welcome? I was about to go to bed. It's 1 a.m. Can't you be a bit quieter? What's the big deal? Are you that upset I came back? Maybe he was drunk, but he seemed very confrontational. He walked towards me, but tripped over one of the boxes and fell dramatically. Hey, clean this mess up. These are all addressed to you. I can't just go opening them. Back talking? And by the way, you should be the one taking care of these. I was puzzled by Jake's statement. What do you mean I should? Just what I said. These boxes contain Jennifer and Mom's stuff. Mostly Jennifer's, I bet. Hold on, why would Jennifer and your mom's stuff be delivered here? With a smug look on his face, Jake began to explain. It's for my sweet sister, of course. She's been renting, but her lease is almost up. She said she's gonna move in with her boyfriend or get married soon, so I figured I'd look out for her until then. Hold on, you never told me. I've been promoted to assistant manager, and I'll be earning more. It won't be a problem. We got married 2 years ago, but to be honest, I hardly had any interactions with Jake's family. So, it's bewildering to be in this situation now. You mentioned once that you weren't close with your parents, didn't you, Jake? Well, there was a time when I found my family a bit too much to handle. But now that I've been promoted to assistant manager and making a bit more money, I figured now's the best time to help out my folks and support my younger sister. You're suddenly talking about living together, are you sure about this? It'll work out. Plus, we've got a spare room, and if we use your room for storage, the 4 of us can live together. What's the problem? He sounded like he had it all figured out, but I wasn't entirely convinced. Moreover, Jake talked about supporting Jennifer until she got married, but I wondered how much of Jennifer's story he really knew. From what I've heard, their versions don't quite match, and it gave me an uneasy feeling. Starting today, we're supporting my mom and Jennifer. If you're not okay with that, I'm gonna divorce you. That's too sudden and not feasible. I wouldn't want to live with them even if it was just for a short time. Fine, then I'll divorce and leave. Give it a shot. That said, I couldn't just pack up and leave immediately. I have to make all the necessary preparations in this house before doing so. Jake needs a reality check. First, I'll start by going through Jake's belongings. I've had suspicions for a while that Jake might be cheating on me. There were times he'd come home late, smelling of a woman's perfume, and I've spotted suspicious cards peeking from his pockets on several occasions. Does he really think I haven't noticed with all these clues lying around? He's fooling himself. Checking our shared computer, Jake had left his account logged in. I was able to go through his emails, and sure enough, they were incriminating. Reading the email filled with sweet words, I got the chills. The person he was emailing was a woman. Digging further, I found hotel newsletters and reservation confirmations. Apparently, he's been going there every Wednesday and Friday. He used to tell me he was out drinking with colleagues or clients on those days, but now everything clicked. I noted down the hotel's name, so if I stake out the place, I might be able to get photos for evidence. But I'm no expert, and the last thing I want is to get caught. I'll have to think of a foolproof way to tail him and gather evidence. Jennifer seems to be coming over to the house in 4 days, but before that, while investigating Jake's affair, I've decided to also check out Jennifer's movements, just to be on the safe side. Jake seems to think Jennifer is some sort of tragic heroine or something, but boy is he wrong. She's just a mistress, scheming to stick around the house until she can make an affair official through marriage. You gotta do what you can now, for any unforeseen circumstances in the future. After all, it never hurts to have a few aces up your sleeve. Mumbling these thoughts to myself, I start checking social media. A friend suggestion pops up. I tap on an icon that seems to be Jennifer's face. Her photo is heavily edited, the shape of her face and the size of her eyes are completely different, but it's unmistakably Jennifer. Browsing through Jennifer's page, I see photos and posts that lead me to an unpleasant truth. You've gotta be kidding me. Most of Jennifer's photos are those hint photos, suggesting she's in a relationship. But what caught my eye was a man's belongings in the background, something familiar. These hint photos didn't show the man's face, but I'm pretty sure it's the husband of a close friend from high school. She was such a good friend that I even gave a speech at her wedding. Plus, I visited her house multiple times when she was single, so I know. He always had a unique taste in belongings and style. I remembered thinking he had a flair for things with uniqueness, so I'm certain about it. One of the items in the photo is a shark bone keychain, identical to the one my friend said she and her husband both have. There's also a uniquely colored wallet and a tie with a distinct pattern. Anyone who knows him would instantly recognize those. I wonder if my high school friend knows about this. No, she's probably living her life unaware of it. I was torn, but decided my friend probably doesn't know. Whether to confront him about the affair or not, I'd leave up to her, but I decided to let her know about the social media account. And there's one more person I need to get in touch with. It's been a while, mother-in-law. You're coming over the day after tomorrow to live with us, right? I heard from Jake, but before that, there's something I'd like to discuss. Oh, what a coincidence. I'm gonna be staying with you from the day after tomorrow, and I had something I wanted to talk to you about too. Given that the mother-in-law also wants to talk, this seems like a good time. I might as well lay it all out now. I'm gonna be blunt. I'm thinking of divorcing Jake, and the reason is that he's been cheating. I'm still at the house now, but once I pack up, I plan to leave. I had a hunch something was up. Jake suddenly started talking about being a good son, and I knew something was off. So, where's the proof? It makes sense for her to ask for proof. If her own son was cheating and that led to a potential divorce, of course she'd want to see evidence. Here it is. We share a computer, and I found these emails and photos. I think they make it clear. Is this all you've got? The way she flips through the printed out emails hurts. Her gaze feels heavy. This is all for now. I really wanted more conclusive evidence before confronting Jake, but I don't have anything else yet. Well, considering it's him, I'd expect him to try and make excuses or lie. Here, take this and hire a detective or whoever you need. She slowly took something out of her purse, a bank book and a debit card. But this money. It's part of my late husband's inheritance. He cheated on me when we were younger, and I just can't stand infidelity. This seems like the perfect opportunity to teach him a lesson. As she said this, she smirked. I'd only spoken to her once or twice before. To be honest, I found her a bit intimidating, so I never imagined she'd be this supportive. Use this money to settle things properly. I've always appreciated that you, Linda, married my good-for-nothing son. I want you to lean on me. With the money the mother-in-law provided, I hired a detective known for his skills in catching cheaters. I got indisputable evidence. Now, I just need to find the right moment to confront Jake. It's been 2 weeks since my mother-in-law and Jennifer started living together. I was almost ready to leave the house. On a day off from work, for both Jake and me, a letter addressed to Jennifer got forwarded to our house, and it turned out to be a ticking time bomb. What? The boyfriend wants to break up? You were just talking about getting married or something, weren't you? What the heck did you do? It's from his wife. She is saying they are not going to divorce and he will dump me instead. Suddenly, Jake grabbed the papers Jennifer was holding. What's this? The sender's name is a woman. This can't be real. It's gotta be some kind of prank. For some reason, Jake seemed to think Jennifer wasn't entirely at fault. On the other hand, my mother-in-law looked as though she had no idea what was going on. Jennifer often talked about her beloved boyfriend. That guy? He's my best friend's husband. She got pregnant, and he said he'd divorce his wife and marry Jennifer? Did you really think he would do that? Wait, so that was a lie? Come on, you tried to break up someone's family. Jennifer, on the verge of tears, defended herself. He always said he and his wife were at odds and could get divorced any day. He told me he wanted to raise a child together if we had one and that he wanted a child with me. They were already on the rocks. So, it ain't cheating or having an affair. Jennifer's always been an easy target for jealousy and grudges. Feeling the urgency, I confronted Jake. So, are you saying infidelity and affairs aren't a big deal? Well, it's just men being men, right? Why overreact for every little thing? You should just let it go. I laid out the pictures a detective took on the table. This picture clearly shows you, Jake. The report says you're cheating with a woman named Janet, a client. Stop playing games. Jake seems to think I'm not really mad and is still laughing it off. I told you, it's just men being men. If you can't handle it, how are you gonna survive in this world? That's it. The decision to divorce still stands. Naturally, I'll start filling for our assets to be divided. Hey, wait a minute. You can't be serious. What's this division thing? Cool your head. From the side, the mother-in-law's angry voice cut in. Both Jake and Jennifer are hopeless. I never thought my own son could be like this. I'm so disappointed. Wait, it's not my fault, Mom. The boyfriend lied to me. I'm a victim. What kind of nonsense are you talking about? Enough of your ridiculous excuses. Next to the arguing mother-in-law and Jennifer, Jake, realizing the gravity of his actions, asked me. You're not serious about the divorce and property division, are you? You still love me, right? What are you talking about? Cheating, making decisions on your own, you're the worst. Remember when you, all by yourself, Decided that living with your mother and Jennifer was the only option, and if I didn't accept it, we'd divorce? Who are you to say that? Unbelievably, upon hearing my words, Jake began to sob. It was fate that Janet and I met. It was pure love. Our relationship is different from ours. You understand, right? You'd support my pure love, wouldn't you? I couldn't, and didn't want to, understand a word he said from start to finish. Anyway, I've packed my things, and I'm leaving. Are you really leaving? How am I gonna live without you? Looking down at Jake pathetically clinging to my feet, I delivered my final words. Not my problem. Expect the divorce process to begin soon. Deal with it. In the end, with the involvement of a lawyer, I smoothly got divorced with Jake and filed so our assets to be divided equitably. Although my ex-mother-in-law had lost her husband earlier, she's in good health and has started living on her own for the first time. I got a message from her saying that she's really enjoying her new life, diving into hobbies and other activities. Rumors have it that Jennifer got pregnant from an affair. You can't keep a secret for long, so it was bound to come out. In the end, she got fired from the agency she worked for. The rumors of her affair spread, and she became labeled as trouble everywhere, making it difficult for her to find employment. Moreover, Jennifer's affair partner chose to reconcile with his wife and child, essentially my best friend, leaving Jennifer behind. One day, Jennifer found out where I was and aggressively confronted me. You told his wife about us, didn't you? Were your well wishes for my happiness a lie? I never said I wished for your happiness. I can't forgive anyone for having an affair, especially since she's my best friend. I can't stand by and watch my best friend suffer. That's all. You're the one who's meddling. Jennifer tried to grab me, but luckily we were in a crowded mall, and a young security guard intervened, preventing any harm. By the way, both of them seem to be trying to lean on my ex-mother-in-law in various ways, but she seems to be rejecting them. Jake got dumped by the woman he was cheating with and, under the stress, got hooked on slot machines. He was avoiding to comply with paying me the property settlement, so I had to request court to enforce the divorce settlement. Rumors of our divorce and his non-compliance spread throughout Jake's workplace. His workplace took the situation very seriously. Even though Jake was performing well, he got demoted to a do-nothing department because of his behavior. In this new department, which is often referred to as a sidelined room, he reportedly has nothing to do all day and is just dead weight to the company. I've successfully divorced Jake and now thoroughly enjoying my single life. I once dreamed of having a child with the man I loved, but that's all in the past now. I need to make sure I earn well. Who I'm dating with the intention of marrying. Our lives, both personal and professional, are fulfilling. He's a male nurse hired midway through his career, very gentle-spoken, and it's really relaxing to talk to him. He's an amazing man who wants to spend his life with me, even if it means not having children. I want to decide my own happiness as I move forward in life. We can divorce if you want, but let me live with our son. After berating me extensively, John looked satisfied as he took a deep breath. As I pondered on how to retort, our son, who had been waiting in the background, stepped forward. If you don't know, Dad, let me tell you. That person is. Pointing at his father's mistress, our son spat out words that made me break into a cheeky smile. My name is Jennifer. I turned 42 this year. Currently, I'm a freelance illustrator while doing housework. I've been married for 15 years and have a son who's in 8th grade this year. Ever since we got married, John has been jumping from job to job, not lasting very long. We mostly live off my income. To raise our son, a steady income is needed, so I've worked hard to make ends meet while also taking care of him. Balancing housework, child raising, and my job, I had to work from home. John often left home for sporadic short-term jobs, making it impossible for me to leave our child behind and work outside. At first, being a newbie to the freelance world was tough, but now, the results are evident, and I'm confident about my stable income and consistent work. Thanks to referrals from former clients, I've landed new projects. In these new assignments, I'm responsible for illustrating educational magazines and brochures. Now that David has grown up and I don't have to look after him as much as I used to, I not only work from home but also manage to go out for work a few times a week. Thus, the three of us live together harmoniously, but there's something that's been bothering me. It's about John. Seeing that I've been earning steadily, John doesn't seem eager to find a new job and has been quite aimless. I'm always worried if it's okay for him at 44 to be living like this. He rarely works full-time, so he should have some free time, but John doesn't help much with housework or child raising. It's been like this since we got married, so I've kinda given up on it. He doesn't seem to be interested in our son, David, who's now in those challenging teenage years, which annoys me. David may not be very talkative and seems distant, but there are times when he helps with the chores when I'm not looking. Maybe he's seen me juggling work and household chores since he was little, so he's the kind of boy who voluntarily offers to help. David has grown up so much, but John, on the other hand, doesn't seem to have matured at all. Lately, John's been coming home late more often, and I guess I've been holding on to some unease and frustration. It's only natural to be suspicious. Even on days when I don't think he's scheduled to work, he says he has to go for work reasons. But I can't imagine he's secretly job hunting without telling us. There are other things he does that make me suspicious. For the past few months, though John hasn't been looking after David much, he's become keen on picking him up and dropping him off at his basketball club. Even though David is just in 8th grade, given the dangers of today's world, our household rule is to always drop off and pick up. I've always been the one squeezing this into my work schedule, but lately, for some reason, John started offering to do it. I appreciate the help with the pickups and drop-offs, but something felt off. I happened to realize the nature of my suspicion by chance when I passed by the place David goes to. I decided to take a different route home for a change of pace after shopping. In front of the place David goes to, I saw John, who wasn't supposed to be there. He had said he'd be late tonight because of work out of town. John was chatting happily with a woman who looked like one of the staffs from the basketball facility in front of the building. I had a bad feeling, and as I stared at the two of them, the woman noticed me and tilted her head, calling out, "Excuse me, are you David's mom?" "Yes, my son always been in your care." "Thank you," I responded, nodding slightly awkwardly to the woman who was talking cutesy. Though I had seen her a few times during drop-offs and pickups, I didn't remember all the faces of the staff. I was wondering which duties she does here. Ignoring my husband who looked rigid and tense, I made small talk with her. The woman introduced herself as Jessica. Isn't it usual to introduce herself with not only name, but also what she's in charge of my child in such situations? Noticing my puzzled expression, my husband seemed to hurry to end their conversation. On the way home, we didn't speak, and it felt like he was purposely avoiding me. Even though he seemed to enjoy talking to Jessica so much, while walking beside me, he was deliberately looking down, avoiding eye contact. I could tell something was up. His late returns recently and his eagerness to do the drop-offs and pickups, combined with his strange behavior after being spotted, made me believe that woman, Jessica, had something to do with it. Is he having an affair with that slightly younger woman? Somewhere in my heart, I knew. I had sensed the change. Ever since he started doing the drop-offs and pickups, he had become noticeably distant from me. That day, when our son returned from the basketball club, I casually inquired about his father's behavior. However, the only response I got from him was a curt "and he was like I dunno." It seemed my son was pretty darn annoyed about his dad wanting to drive him to and from the facility every day. Chasing after our reluctant son and forcing him to there just didn't seem right. I've started to cast suspicious glances at him for some time now. And those suspicions were gonna be proven right soon enough. I was just passing by, so I thought I'd drop in. "David, how are you feeling?" "Thank you for coming all this way, Jessica. Now, please have some coffee." Jessica, whom I had not suspected of being my husband's mistress, began to find excuses to visit our home more and more. She would mention our son now and then, but that was clearly just a pretext. She always appeared during the hours my husband was home, not me or my son. Watching the two of them conversing cheerfully in the living room, I was sure of John's infidelity. A month after I began to notice something odd about my husband's behavior, he started coming home later and later, sometimes leaving the house for a few days at a time. I'd subtly asked him what he was up to, as he had stealthily come home late the night before, when I pointed out that his body that had sunk into the sofa quivered. Jokingly, I was like, "At least spare me the cheating," and laughed it off, but John suddenly stood up and glared at me. "You just stick to your work. I'm taking care of David, so don't pry into it unnecessarily." Whether it was the way I asked or something else, he seemed irritated, and he left the living room with a sigh. I was furious to be told as if he was doing everything when he had left all the housework and David to me. "What's the matter, Mom?" David, who had been watching our petty quarrels and squabbles, unusually spoke up. "Oh, it's nothing. What about you, David? Why are you up at this hour?" Coming out of his room, David stared at me intently before slowly opening his mouth. Hesitantly, he told me about the female staff who he thought might be his father's mistress. According to David, Jessica would cling to him a lot at the facility. David, who found it utterly annoying, would ignore her, but he was frustrated that she would come to our house. I disliked it as well, so it was obvious that my son would be annoyed by someone from his basketball club imposing on our home. I was relieved to know that I was not the only one who disliked it, but the problem was far from solved. When I returned home from a client meeting, I could hear joyful conversation from the living room. It was the voices of John and Jessica. David was probably holed up in his room, as there was no sign of him joining the conversation. When I opened the door to the living room, both of them turned their eyes to me. John, as usual, looked uncomfortable, but Jessica smiled at me with complete confidence. "Welcome back, David's mom. I ran into John, so he invited me in." Somewhere along the line, Jessica had started addressing my husband by his name, and I had a deep-seated unease about it. "Oh, we meet often, don't we? Isn't it a busy time for you at work?" I asked with a hint of sarcasm. She was like, "Well, this is part of my job," with a smug face. "What's part of the job?" I felt like yelling at her for so boldly making herself at home. "It's just that this house feels so cozy. It looks like you don't clean it thoroughly, like it has a homely feel, you know? I mean it in a good way." Jessica, subtly pointing out the deficiencies in my housekeeping, had a sly grin on her face. "I'm sorry for the messy house. She's always been bad at housework. I wish she'd step up a bit more since she's always at home." My husband didn't rebut, but instead seemed to side with Jessica, chuckling along. Even though I work from home, I am somewhat self-conscious about not keeping up with housework. But if he'd be more proactive in helping with chores and childcare, it wouldn't be an issue. I couldn't understand why I was the only one being mocked and ridiculed. Unable to bear the tension in the room, I hastily left the living room for the bedroom, still holding my stuff. I was so frustrated, sad, and embarrassed. I feared that Jessica might eventually take over my place in the family. If she weren't associated with the basketball team my son goes to, I might have snapped back. But I worried about the repercussions for my son. Even after that, my husband and Jessica continued their dates, flaunting their relationship in front of me, who couldn't say a word. I'd hear from others that they often met outside, under the pretense of discussing my son's education. I decided to gather evidence during my husband's absences, and lo and behold, I found loads of evidence of his infidelity. Even though he always claimed we couldn't afford gifts for birthdays or our anniversary, I found receipts from motels, fancy restaurants, and high-end brand watches and jewelry in his coat pocket. I even found receipts from places he told me we couldn't afford to go. It hurt to think he'd go with his mistress but not his wife. Still, I kept my composure and continued collecting evidence of his affairs. The thought of divorce crossed my mind, but I wanted to hang in there at least until David graduated from high school. However, I vowed to gather as much evidence as possible so that, if the time comes, I'd be in a favorable position. I wondered where all the money he was spending on his mistress came from. Even if he put in all of his salary, it would be hard to keep up this charade. As I wandered around the house deep in thought, I suddenly remembered something and went pale. In our house, there's an account where we've been saving up for my son's college fund. I had this overwhelming bad feeling, and cold sweat ran down my back. I quickly checked transactions of that account. What was recorded in the account was evidence of substantial amounts being withdrawn several times over the past few months. I had created this savings account specifically to secure my son's education funds just in case. I hadn't checked it in a while and was shocked to find that the balance had decreased significantly. I had meticulously managed our credit card usage and monthly bills, but I hadn't been able to check this savings account monthly. The realization hit me hard, and I began to tremble. I tried hard to steady my shaking hands. The money he spent on his affair came from the savings I had put aside for our son. I didn't even care who he was having an affair with anymore. What I couldn't forgive was the fact that he was using the money saved for our child's future for his own selfish needs. His betrayal against me as his wife pales in comparison to the betrayal against our own son. I swallowed my boiling anger and decided to continue acting like everything was normal. I didn't want our son, who's at such an impressionable age, to catch on. I chose to keep all the problems and worries to myself, trying not to burden our son, who has been studying so hard. But the stress took a toll on me, and I started making small mistakes in my household chores and at work. At work, even Mrs. Smith, a client I had known for years, noticed my worn-out state. "Jennifer, you seem off lately. Don't overdo it at work. If there's anything bothering you, please let me know anytime." "Thank you, Mrs. Smith." I felt pathetic for making her worry, but her words did offer some comfort. While I was struggling, my husband seemed to be having a blast with his mistress, more than ever. Without my interference, he seemed more relaxed. Sooner or later, our son, David, would inevitably face the problems surrounding our family. David noticed my downtrodden demeanor and silently approached to help fold the laundry. "I kinda know what's going on." "Huh?" He was like, "Do whatever you wanna do, Mom. You don't have to worry about me." He took the folded laundry to the dresser. He's not much of a talker, but his thoughtful actions warmed my heart. And it made me even angrier at the traitor who touched the money I had saved for our precious son. There needed to be some sort of retribution for the traitor. First, I wondered if I should reach out to that person who told me they'd always be there to support me. I clenched my fists tightly and swore vengeance on my husband and his mistress. One evening, my husband suddenly informed me he'd be away for almost a week due to work. He claimed it was for a training program in another state, but I doubted that's the truth. The restaurant chain he's worked for only operated within our state and didn't have any locations or offices outside. When he took the job, the very same husband boasted that one of its perks was not having to relocate out of state. When my son and I heard this story, we responded, but deep down, we were both highly critical of John. My son casually said to my husband, "You know, I heard one of the staffs from my club gonna be off work for a week too. At this time of year? I don't know if she's going on a vacation, but that seems pretty unusual. I mean, it'd be tough to go on a week-long vacation unless you've got some cash." As we conversed in a nonchalant tone, my husband looked at us with a startled expression. Until then, he had been proudly talking about the intensity of the training he was going to attend, but he suddenly became silent and stared down. Glancing at him, I noticed he was anxiously looking at his smartphone. Ever since I became sure of my husband's infidelity, I've been keeping tabs on both him and Jessica. I even hired a private investigator, who informed me that Jessica, who's working at the basketball facility, is also taking a week off. I've known all along that my husband's business trip was just a cover for a romantic getaway. I could have caught him red-handed, but I had other plans. I've been planning something ever since I knew about my husband's intentions to travel with Jessica. Of course, I had no intention of proceeding without my son's consent, but now he was on board. On the day of their trip, I waved goodbye to my eager husband, and then my son and I began cleaning the house. Along with cleaning, with the help of some relatives who came over, we also started packing. Our plan was to move out while my husband was away and stay in somewhere else. Until we found a new home, we were gonna stay with some relatives for a bit. Upon hearing our situation, the relatives, angered by my husband's actions yet concerned for David, gladly offered us a room. Moreover, I ensured that my husband couldn't access our savings account by transferring all the remaining money to my personal account. While making preparations, I noticed my husband's belongings were left behind. I couldn't leave his stuff behind when vacating the house. After some thought, I decided to send his belongings to a particular place. After getting Mrs. Smith's consent, I handed over the boxes to the pickup service. Looking around the tidy house, my son and I shared a smile. A few days after we moved, I was startled by the sudden ringing of my phone while staying at my relative's place. Seeing the caller's name made me sigh involuntarily. "Hello, Jennifer? Hey. What's up in the middle of the day? Actually, during my training, I ran out of money. Can you transfer a bit to my account?" My husband, who called in a panic, was obviously lying and begging me for money. No wonder our savings account was empty. He couldn't withdraw any funds. He must have really been in a bind since he sounded much more desperate than usual. Was it because he didn't want to look bad in front of Jessica? I was utterly exasperated. When I declined, he almost sounded like he was about to cry. With a smirk, I was like, "Why don't you just use the account you always withdraw from? Isn't there still a lot left?" After a moment of silence, he started yelling and was like, "Are you okay with me being broke?" But I didn't indulge him. Instead, I goaded him further. "Your training's gonna end soon anyway. You'll be fine even without money." Suddenly, in the background, the frantic voice of a woman could be heard. That's right, I had been waiting for this moment. Taken aback by Jessica's voice in the background, my husband hastily hung up. Now everything was in place. The next day, my son and I were headed to a specific location. A magnificent mansion with a well-maintained garden. Anyone could tell that the residents were wealthy. On cue, my son and I found my cheating husband and his mistress in a room. My terrified husband sat on the floor, apologizing to someone. That someone, with a stern look on her face, was Mrs. Smith, a longtime client of mine and currently the principal of a middle school. David, my son, goes to her school, and Mrs. Smith and I have built a close relationship over the years. We trust each other with our personal troubles. "I'm really sorry for my husband's trouble. I should be the one apologizing. Because of my good-for-nothing daughter, all this happened." It's turned out Jessica, who was on a trip with my husband, was grilled by her parents for a package she received at home and had no choice but to return home immediately. Naturally, she told my husband, John, to come with her. Upon hearing Mrs. Smith's words, my husband started to shake in fear. Mrs. Smith had always been concerned about my deteriorating health after knowing about John's affair. When I finally confided in her about the affair and she found out that the mistress was her daughter, she was utterly devastated. But Mrs. Smith wanted to make amends for her daughter's actions and had been cooperating with me ever since. She deeply apologized me, pointing at the piles of boxes. She sternly reprimanded her daughter. "You should be ashamed of yourself for always wanting what isn't yours. Your father and sisters were dumbfounded when they saw these packages yesterday." "But Mom, it's a misunderstanding. And who would send so many packages to our house? Isn't this woman out of her mind? John, say something." Jessica said that, her voice shaking with tears, and tried to force John, who didn't say anything, to join her. However, I doubted John would come up with any decent excuse after I glared at him. Jessica, with a panicked look on her face, blurted out that she didn't know her mother worked with me. Jessica never wanted her strict mother to know about her affair with a married man. Mrs. Smith, being an educator, possesses a strict moral code and won't tolerate dishonest behavior. She probably wouldn't ever forgive her daughter's actions. However, I couldn't muster a shred of sympathy for Jessica. "I'm gonna insist on apologize from you. I'll make sure my daughter pays for her sin, even if it takes her whole life. I'll ensure she fulfills her responsibility.
You've got to be kidding me! Why is this happening to me?
Ignoring the hysterical Jessica, I quietly glared at my silent husband standing next to her.
Hey, don't you have something to say to me?
As I sent a sharp glance alongside David, for some reason, he started berating me. Jessica is a wonderful person. She thinks about the children way more than you ever did. Jessica is domestic and doesn't act all high and mighty even though she earns more than me. You're a failure as a wife. Really? We can divorce if you want, but let me live with our son. I plan on raising him with Jessica. After vehemently berating me, my husband took a satisfying breath. While I was thinking of a retort, David, who had been standing behind me, stepped forward.
She's not a regular staff there, just an internship at the club. And don't you ever try to get all chummy with me again. Always flirting with men, it's disgusting.
Just as my son said, Jessica hadn't been officially hired there. My husband always believed she was passionate and experienced in the industry involving students' education or activities, which was just laughable. Well, it seemed they both had their secrets. Looking at the stunned Jessica, I decided to give her a piece of advice before I go.
Did you know that I pay for the rent, the living expenses, and even David's tuition fees? This man, John, has been working odd jobs for years. You think he's okay?
Hey. That's. John, with a face drained of color, tries to interject, but it was already too late. Jessica was so shocked by the revelation that she collapsed on the spot, motionless. From what I could tell, John had been acting as if he had plenty of money to spare. He must have been hiding the fact that I was the breadwinner of the family to save face. In Jessica's eyes, I seemed like a lazy bum who neither worked nor took care of household chores properly. Mrs. Smith was left devastated, facing the harsh reality presented to her by my husband and Jessica. After David and I happily came home, it seemed John was kicked out of Mrs. Smith's house, looking defeated with Jessica and a load of stuffs. Months have flown by since the move. On Mrs. Smith's advice, I decided to leave my divorce process to a competent lawyer. Thanks to having a professional handle things, all the complicated procedures went smoothly, and I've been relieved. I heard that the savings I had set aside for David's education could also be added to the claim as a child support. As for Jessica, rumors spread quickly at the basketball club about her having an affair with a student's parent, and she seems to have been kicked out. Losing her job, Jessica sought help from her parents, but Mrs. Smith didn't seem willing to help. Cut off from all support from her family, I heard she's now lost and confused. Jessica, despising a man without money, spat out words of disdain and abandoned John. John, who has no stable income, keeps trying to reconcile in every way possible, but neither David nor I are gonna agree that. Mrs. Smith feels terribly guilty for her daughter ruining a family. I held the downcast principal's hand and was like, let's keep working together. I'm really grateful for the principal, thanks to whom I've got a new job. Work has been going smoothly, and life with just David and me is filled with hope.
The job you do, Mom, is really amazing. You're the mom I'm proud of.
Looking at a magazine featuring my illustrations, David smiled joyfully. Touched by David's casual words, I, who was working on my laptop, discreetly wiped a tear from my eye. I want to keep pursuing my career as an illustrator, but above all, I want to work even harder for my precious David.
Your father and mother are in critical condition. You need to cut your trip short and come home immediately.
I pleaded desperately to Tyler. But Tyler's response was heartless.
I'm on a trip with my colleagues. Handle it on your own. You're probably exaggerating anyway, right?
I'm busy, so I'm gonna hang up now. Later.
Hold on a second.
I tried to reach out to Tyler, but he hung up on me. 2 weeks later. When Tyler came home without any remorse, I spoke up. Both their funerals are over.
What?
Tyler froze with a puzzled look on his face.
What do you mean by both their funerals?
Are you trying to play some sick joke on me? He asked me frantically.
It's not a joke. Didn't I call you 2 weeks ago that your father and mother were critically ill?
I answered Tyler's question. But why so suddenly? Tyler was at a loss for words. My name is Jessica Atkins. I'm 56 years old and a full-time homemaker. I used to work in the administrative department of a major company, but I left the job when I got married. I met my husband Tyler during college. When I became a college student, I joined the tennis club. The reason was simply because a friend invited me. I had never played tennis before. I just wanted to have fun and make friends. That was the feeling when I joined with, but reality was different. At that time, Tyler, who was the head of the tennis club, was a strict guy aiming for national tournaments. For Tyler, it didn't matter whether you had experience or not. It was all about skill. Every day, Tyler would relentlessly serve the ball during practice, and if you couldn't return it, he'd berate you. Being a novice, I couldn't even make contact with the ball using my racket. And Tyler would scold me for it.
Jessica, are you kidding me? You're just in the way. Go pick up the balls or something,
Tyler said, effectively kicking me off the tennis court. I felt so humiliated by Tyler's insults. I was always relegated to just picking up balls, barely ever holding a racket. Out of sheer frustration, I practiced my tennis swings and form even at home. Perhaps my hard work eventually paid off. One day, as usual, Tyler served the ball, but this time, I managed to powerfully return it. Tyler, seemingly having expected me to miss, stared in shock. But in the next moment, he exclaimed,
Jessica, that was incredible,
with the biggest smile on his face. It was in that instant that I unexpectedly fell head over heels for him. After that, Tyler continued to be strict, and I kept trying to keep up with his intense training regimen. And then, one day after some time had passed, it was at an evening out drinking with friends. In our group, we have a get-together once a month. The purpose is to deepen our friendships, even outside of our group activities. On the way home from one of those gatherings, I happened to be alone with Tyler. Out of the blue, he confessed his feelings to me. I've fallen for you, Jessica. I want us to be together. I was taken aback. Tyler had never shown any signs of affection towards me. But I had feelings for him too. So, I replied,
I like you too. Let's give it a shot.
That marked the beginning of our relationship. Tyler wanted to keep our relationship a secret from the club members, so as not to affect the team morale. Still, I was so in love with Tyler back then, I was just happy to be with him. We continued dating even after we both graduated from college, and we got married when I was 26. At Tyler's request, I left my job upon our marriage. I'll always be by Tyler's side from now on. Back then, I was head over heels, daydreaming about a dazzling future with Tyler. 30 years have passed since Tyler and I got married. In the early days, we went on frequent dates and were very close. But, after 30 years, things had become somewhat routine. Even I stopped caring as much about my appearance as I used to. Back in my 20s, I used to wear trendy clothes and was pretty fashionable. Every time I went on a date with Tyler, I remember putting on a full face of makeup. But look at me now. As long as I'm dressed, I don't much care about coordinating outfits. I've grown to love loose skirts with stretchy elastic waists more than those with zippers. Now that I'm a stay-at-home wife, I rarely see other people, so I go barefaced from morning till night. I can't even recall the last time I wore makeup. Some might think I've let myself go. Comparing to my 20s, my body has changed quite a bit. I was fairly slim back then, but not anymore. I've put on weight and now resemble the before pictures you see on weight loss shows. Maybe this change in appearance is one of the reasons our relationship has become routine. Gradually, I feel like Tyler's view of me has shifted from wife to mom. Even though I'm not his mother, he occasionally jokes,
Mom, can I have another coffee?
By the way, my mother-in-law is still around and lives in an apartment about a 10-minute walk from our house with my father-in-law. So, we live close by but separately. My in-laws are wonderful people and always show concern for me. Because they are so caring, I wanted to be there for them, so I visited them often. But lately, my in-laws' health has been declining. My father-in-law has been battling a serious illness, and the doctors say there's not much more they can do. Tearfully, my father-in-law told my mother-in-law and me,
I want to spend my last days at home.
So, he was discharged from the hospital and is now receiving palliative care at home. Looking after my father-in-law on her own, my mother-in-law seems exhausted and her expression has darkened. Being a stay-at-home wife, I help with my father-in-law's care almost every day, but living with him must be tough for my mother-in-law.
It's hard, Jessica. Just for one night, could you stay with us?
She asks with a vulnerable expression.
I'm sorry. Tyler comes home at night.
It hurt, but I had to turn my mother-in-law down. I see. Upon hearing my refusal, my mother-in-law murmured with a look of despair. Every night, I have to take care of Tyler. Tyler is quite the dominant husband and doesn't lift a finger to help around the house. He just throws his dirty socks anywhere. Of course, dinner has to be ready and warm by the time Tyler gets home. Leftovers are absolutely out of the question. If he finds out, there's no telling how much he'll lash out. Once, I couldn't get home in time for Tyler's return because I was taking care of my father-in-law. The moment I got home, Tyler, with a face as red as a beet, yelled at me.
You should prioritize me over my dad. I'm your family, remember?
I wanted to point out that my father-in-law is also his family, but I kept quiet. Because if I had argued, Tyler would have just shouted even louder. Because of things like this, I always have to prioritize Tyler. Every day feels so constricted. Being a stay-at-home wife, I feel guilty and can't stand up to Tyler. I couldn't help my downcast mother-in-law, and could only look at her with concern. Lately, Tyler's been coming home late a lot. And Tyler never lets me know. Sometimes he even comes home on the last train. Today too, Tyler got home past midnight.
I'm back!
Tyler greeted me cheerfully. His face was red, and he seemed a bit tipsy. Did you go out drinking again? You've been coming home late a lot lately, I said, holding the bag Tyler handed me.
It's my money, and I'll spend it however I want. You're just a stay-at-home wife, so you should just obey me.
Tyler retorted gruffly. But don't you think it's too frequent? Who are you going out with every time? Their families might be worried too. I hesitantly asked Tyler. Maybe Tyler's been forcing people to go drinking with him. Tyler's been with the company for a long time and holds a position of authority. It's hard for most to say no to someone like that. Tyler then replied with a smug smile.
It's all good. I just always drink with the same coworker. Plus, the guy lives alone and is single. He's always happy when I buy him a drink.
Tyler said, smugly. I couldn't say anything back, being a stay-at-home wife without much say in matters. Then, I had an idea and decided to talk to Tyler about it. Could you let me know in advance when you're gonna go out for drinks? Your mom seems really stressed out. And your dad's condition isn't great either. I'd like to be there for them as much as possible. But Tyler laughed off my concerns.
No can do. When I go out depends on my mood. Besides, Mom will handle Dad's situation. Jessica, you should be all in for me.
As I was taken aback by Tyler's harsh words, he said. Instead of standing there, get the bath ready. You're so slow. With that, he quickly headed to the bathroom. Yes, I'm sorry. All I could do was respond like that. Then, one day, Tyler suddenly told me,
I'm gonna go on a trip for 2 weeks from next week.
While I stood there in shock, Tyler cheerfully flipped through a guidebook, pondering what he'd eat. And he was planning to go to Australia. Regaining my composure, I asked Tyler, why the sudden international trip? What about your job? And I don't even have a passport? Tyler seemed a bit annoyed with my questions.
I got a bonus, so I thought I'd just go for it. I've already requested PTO from work. And I'm not going with you, Jessica, so you don't need a passport, right?
Tyler answered nonchalantly.
I haven't even had a proper honeymoon since we got married.
Who are you going with? I asked Tyler. Even for day trips, Tyler would say it's a waste of money and never took me along. Now this sudden international trip? It seemed suspicious. I stared intently at Tyler. Tyler retorted,
I'm going with a guy from work. Now, get dinner ready already.
I realized it would be challenging to press him further. Tyler probably wouldn't answer me if I continued to ask, and might even snap at me. Though I felt frustrated, I reluctantly started preparing dinner. And that day, Tyler left for his trip early in the morning. But by noon, I found myself frantically calling Tyler.
What do you want? I'm about to board a plane for an international trip. Read the room.
Tyler snapped at me as soon as he answered.
My in-laws are in critical condition. Please cancel your trip and come home immediately.
I pleaded with Tyler desperately. If he hadn't boarded the plane yet, there was still time. At least, that's what I thought. But Tyler's response was cold.
I'm on vacation with my colleague. Handle it yourself.
You're probably exaggerating anyway. I'm busy, gonna hang up now.
Bye. Wait a second.
I tried to reach out to Tyler, but he hung up anyway. No matter how many times I called back, he didn't answer.
You'll regret this,
I whispered to myself. 2 weeks later.
I'm back.
Tyler walked in cheerfully, carrying a large suitcase. I approached the unapologetic Tyler and said, Both their funerals are over.
What?
Tyler looked puzzled, as if he didn't understand what I was saying.
What do you mean by both their funerals? Are you playing some kind of sick joke?
Tyler, clearly panicking, questioned me. I sighed deeply at Tyler's flustered demeanor.
It's no joke. Don't you remember I called you 2 weeks ago telling you your parents were critically ill?
I replied to Tyler's question.
But, why all of a sudden?
Tyler trailed off, unable to find the words. And I found myself sitting on the floor.
When I went to visit your parents, they both had collapsed with pale faces. I called an ambulance in a panic, but the doctor said they were both in critical condition. Your dad needed care for a while now, and your mom had been looking unwell recently. Just a series of unfortunate events, I guess.
I explained to Tyler, with a detached tone, about the events leading up to my in-laws' critical condition. I'm truly heartbroken that my in-laws ended up like this. I was visiting my in-laws' house almost every day and still couldn't save them in time. To this day, I regret not going to their place sooner. But right now, I'm just so angry at Tyler. My in-laws are his real parents. Yet, Tyler chose himself over them until the very end. No matter how much I pleaded, Tyler always prioritized himself. Remembering the tired look on my mother-in-law's face just makes me even angrier at Tyler. Tyler, with a grimaced face, remained silent. He probably can't come to terms with reality. I decided to press Tyler further. It's your fault, isn't it? Choosing a trip with your colleague over your own parents. Did you enjoy your vacation? I asked Tyler with a sly smile. But Tyler just stayed silent. So, I decided to prod a bit more. Well, I guess a trip with your lover is fun, right? 2 weeks seems a bit long though. When I said that, Tyler, as if resigning himself, began to talk. You knew? Yeah, I've been seeing Baker from work. She's over a decade younger than you, and she comforts me. It seems Tyler was indeed cheating. His recent late nights were probably because of his affair with this Baker. As I stayed silent, Tyler, thinking I had accepted his confession, began to talk more. Baker is nothing like you. She has a slim figure, is beautiful, and she has a job. You're nothing compared to her. Tyler was clearly proud of himself. Huh. Not caring at all, I responded nonchalantly. He seemed to forget he had asked me to become a stay-at-home wife after we got married. Then, as if he had an idea, Tyler made a suggestion.
That's right. Now that my parents are gone and there's no one to oppose a divorce with you, and I can live here with Baker. So leave right now.
I was flabbergasted by Tyler's words. Up to now, I'd been a stay-at-home wife, always deferring to whatever Tyler said. I had no regular income of my own, and part of me lacked the confidence to move out and support myself. But after seeing Tyler prioritize a trip with his mistress over his critically ill parents, I didn't want to be with him anymore.
Fine, I'll leave right now. Goodbye.
And with that, I packed a minimal amount of stuff and left the house. A week after I started staying at a budget motel, my husband Tyler called my cell. Hello? As soon as I picked up, Tyler jumped in.
I can't find the checkbook at home.
He sounded pretty panicked. However, I left all the statements under Tyler's name at the house. Of course, that includes the bank book where Tyler's salary gets deposited. The only checkbook I took is in my name. Did you check properly? As soon as I said that, Tyler shouted.
It's the checkbook in your name. That account had a pretty good amount of money, right? It's a joint property, so half of it's mine, isn't it?
After recklessly spending on trips and whatnot, I couldn't believe Tyler was now bringing up joint property. Holding back a heavy sigh, I calmly responded. The money in that checkbook is from gifts I received from my family and savings from when I was single. So it doesn't count as joint property, you know? Tyler, sounding frantic, replied.
That's a problem. I nearly spent all of my last month's salary and bonus on the overseas trip. I thought I could cover the shortfall in our living expenses by withdrawing from your account.
Up until now, I'd kept my checkbook in a drawer where Tyler could easily see it. I had no intention of hiding it from Tyler. So Tyler must have sneaked a peek at the balance. I've moved out, Tyler, so I have no idea about your living expenses. Maybe ask for an advance on your paycheck? I firmly declined Tyler's request. Then, I added, just to give Tyler a heads up. By the way, you might want to assume that there's hardly any inheritance from your parents. They were living on their pensions, and with the cost of your father's care, they were barely getting by. And you better clear out their rented apartment soon, or you'll be paying rent every month. My in-laws had been living in a rented apartment, barely making ends meet with the rent and the cost of caring for my father-in-law. My mother-in-law somehow managed to save and get by each month. I reckon my mother-in-law had her share of worries and stress.
You're kidding.
Tyler sounded shocked over the phone. So, I decided to give Tyler the final blow.
I have no responsibilities to help you out. You are on your own,
I declared cheerfully.
Why?
Tyler's voice was full of disbelief. Tyler is already struggling with money, and he's probably panicking. Moreover, he's lost my in-laws and has no one else to turn to.
I've already lost my real parents. How can you be so heartless? Are you some kind of monster?
Tyler cried out, venting his frustrations at me. Despite having kicked me out with no income, he seemed to have forgotten that. I have no sympathy for Tyler who's lost so much. It's all Tyler's fault. So, I laughed and replied.
Well, duh. You cheated. Don't expect me to help you out after what you have done.
Hearing the word cheated, Tyler flinched.
I don't want to ask the company for the help. If the company finds out about Baker and me, it'll be a disaster.
Tyler's voice was shaky. But it was not my concern. I don't even know the face of Baker. It's you and Baker who did wrong in the first place, right? I challenged Tyler. I hope they both lose their social credibility. I've got nothing left to lose. Whatever happens to them, it's none of my business.
It's all my fault. Just help me out this time, please.
Tyler pleaded with a voice full of desperation. No way. You're gonna regret this big time. I told him that and ended the call with Tyler. Tyler and I eventually got divorced. At first, Tyler was reluctant to agree to the divorce, mainly because of the financial issue. But in the end, he was persuaded by the lawyer I hired and signed the divorce papers. Tyler always acted arrogant in front of me and my in-laws but was very submissive in front of others. He's the kind who's all bark and no bite. That's probably why Tyler couldn't stand up to a professional like the lawyer and ended up being told what to do. Our properties will be split equitably. All thanks to my lawyer. Tyler had almost exhausted his savings on a trip abroad with Baker. So, he was tight on cash. My lawyer guessed that Tyler will be very uncooperative. But in the end, I was pleased with the situation. Now, about what happened afterward. It seems Tyler is living paycheck to paycheck, having difficulty to support himself. On top of that, he had additional expenses like cleaning out and paying rent for the rental apartment of my in-laws. And apparently, he got dumped by Baker. Initially, Baker was very ambitious and got close to Tyler for her own career advancement. But affair was exposed right after we got divorced. Tyler got demoted, and it seems Baker got transferred to a remote branch. If Director Adkins is getting demoted, I don't need him anymore. Thanks for everything. That's what was said, and Tyler got dumped. Though Tyler got demoted, he didn't get transferred within the company. So, he seems to be feeling out of place and uncomfortable. Now, being dumped by Baker and all alone, Tyler has contacted me through my lawyer.
I messed up. I broke up with Baker, so I want another shot with you.
That's what I heard through the attorney. Since I've already blocked Tyler's calls, it seems like his only option is to relay messages through the lawyer. Knowing Tyler's usually timid nature, the fact that he's pleading with the lawyer like this tells me he's really backed into a corner. On top of that, he's been saying things like,
I'm seriously out of money right now. Can you lend me some from your savings back when you were single? Please!
Making demands that don't benefit me in the slightest. Even the attorney seemed taken aback by this and relayed it to me with a chuckle. I guess Tyler's gonna have a tough life from here on out. Frankly, I hope he continues to struggle and squirm. By the way, I got in touch with Baker through the lawyer, and she responded in a very respectful way. I was told, through the lawyer, that she said,
When I was with Mr. Tyler, my expenses were quite low, so I had fun with his money.
But it did not last long. Please tell her I deeply regret everything. It seems she was never really interested in Tyler, just his position. Tyler was head over heels for Baker, and to see him ruin his life over it, it's quite pitiful. Thinking of Tyler's misfortune made me smirk. Since then, I've decided to get back to work. Would you believe it, I took a part-time job at a convenience store. It's my first time in customer service, but it's surprisingly fun. I was initially worried about being on my feet all day. But once I started, time just flies, and it's a blast. Beyond working the register, there's ordering products, frying snacks, and a lot more to convenience store work. I even get to use my housekeeping skills with the cleaning tasks. I've heard from the manager that if I work hard, I could become a permanent employee. Apparently, there's been others like me who made the transition. Being in my 50s is like being at the halfway point in life. Being divorced, I initially thought my future was bleak. But even at this age, I'm discovering new things and having a ball. I want to keep looking forward and keep on moving. That's how I feel right now. I won't approve any paid leave for you. I couldn't believe my ears. You always challenge me. You don't need to come back. Having been told this, even I had reached my breaking point.
Are you really sure?
She must have been taken aback by my response. Her eyes widened in surprise.
Too bad.
My name is Nancy, and I turned 28 this year. I've been working at the Candu Corporation for 10 years, making me an experienced employee at a young age. While my family wasn't wealthy, my parents took great care of me. Being an only child, I rarely got new things. Most of my clothes were hand-me-downs from cousins or neighbors. It was rare to get new outfits. Still, I was quite content. Neighbors and relatives showered me with love, and I have fond memories of going on picnics in local parks with my parents during weekends. Perhaps it was out of sympathy, but I'm still close with my cousins and we keep in touch regularly. Growing up surrounded by love, when I was in 12th grade, I served as the student council president and had excellent grades. My class teacher suggested I pursue further studies. Despite being offered a scholarship to college based on my grades, I declined. I'm not interested in going to college. I want to work as a public servant. My parents tried to persuade me otherwise, but considering the costs of living alone, I went against their wishes and became a public servant. I just wanted to relieve my parents of any burden as soon as possible. But then, my father was diagnosed with a severe illness and passed away before I could repay his kindness. I decided to take care of my mother in place of my father, continuing to live with her. In the hustle and bustle of daily life, time flew as I experienced various facets of working life. By the time 5 years had passed, I'd become a respected figure in the office, leading a comfortable life. I've been given the responsibility of training newcomers and occasionally acting on behalf of my boss. Moreover, the bonuses were good, allowing me to give about $600 monthly to my parents. In my personal life, I enjoyed trips with friends, colleagues, and my boyfriend. One day, our manager was transferred and replaced by a new one. This new female manager was said to be the president's daughter. Rumor had it she had been loafing around, relying on her father's wealth. Unable to stand by and watch, the president decided to put her in a responsible position to teach her some life lessons. Only the president and I knew this. Just because she was the president's daughter, many in the company, who knew she was hired due to her background and had little real-world experience, didn't think highly of her. The work environment started getting tense, and the atmosphere was increasingly stifling. And to think the trouble would eventually come my way. It happened when I made her a cup of hot coffee upon her request.
What's this? Are you trying to annoy me?
I made it just as you told me. She glared at me and threw the hot coffee in my direction.
Ouch! What are you doing?
Unable to avoid it, I held my right arm that got splashed with coffee and glared back at her.
How is this according to my instructions? I said I wanted it warm with extra milk and sugar.
I made it warm with 2 glasses of milk and 2 scoops of sugar.
It's too hot. And it's common sense to take 4 glasses of milk and 3 scoops of sugar.
She again acts as if her own common sense is the world's common sense and imposes her values on others. I'm sorry. I'll make you another one right away.
This is why I don't like high school grads. I heard from my father that you're competent and trusted by everyone.
I have much to learn. It's only because of the support of everyone here that I seem competent. As she continued with her snide remarks, the pain in my burned arm intensified. My mind was occupied with trying very hard to resist the urge to get away from this place and cool my burnt arm as soon as possible. I was looking forward to meeting you after my father spoke so highly of you. But what a disappointment. I wonder how you won him over. Upon hearing her harsh words, a nearby employee tried to step in and help, but I signaled that I was okay, trying not to get noticed by her. Next, that employee would become the target of her. Those who had been targeted by her so far were mentally driven into a corner and forced to resign voluntarily. And this time, it seems that I've become the target of her. As I was pondering how to resolve the situation, she forcibly grabbed my burned arm and squeezed the burned area tightly.
You've got guts to ignore me. Don't think you'll get away with this.
I grimaced in pain. Satisfied with my reaction, she released my arm and ordered me to make coffee again. I excused myself and hurried to the pantry to cool the affected area. It sucks. After work, I immediately visited a dermatologist and got prescribed an ointment, but it never completely healed and left a mark, so I dressed in a way that others couldn't see, to avoid causing concern. From that day on, the harassment from her escalated.
What's this document? Nothing but mistakes. Don't take your job lightly.
What exactly is wrong with the document? While trying to gauge her mood, I asked, and she threw it at me.
There's no way there could be mistakes in this practice document I did. And yet, To be pointed out like this with a red pen, it's unpleasant.
I sighed at the immature behavior of such a grown adult. To be frank, this document clearly needs to be redone due to its inadequacies. You came into this department without understanding anything. I would appreciate it if you could accept the mistakes honestly and acquire knowledge appropriate for a manager. As a trainer, I've been assigning tasks to her, utilizing the experience I had with new employees so far, but nothing seemed to get through to her, a lump of pride.
Don't talk back. You guys should just do everything. I'm the manager, so I don't have to do this kind of stuff.
That's not how it works. Besides, this is what the president personally told us. You're desperate to be liked by my father, huh? Weren't you from a fatherless family? I was a little surprised when she suddenly brought up the topic of my family. Furthermore, I had never talked about this with her before. To be precise, you have only your mother now, right? Despite working so hard in a poor family, your father wasn't rewarded and fell ill. We're at work now. Let's stop discussing irrelevant topics. I just thought of having a little interaction. What a boring woman. Even I couldn't hide my irritation when she made fun of my parents. You're getting angry, huh? That's hilarious. My parents are very wonderful and respectable people. You, who know nothing, have no right to say anything. She quickly responded to the slight drop in my voice tone.
So that's your true nature, huh? Is it okay to have that attitude with the president's daughter? Maybe I should report to my father about your true nature and how I've been treated badly by you. Feel free to do so. Please correct the test document properly and submit it by today. I'm definitely gonna drive you out.
As I turned my back on her, she whispered in a voice only I could hear, but I ignored her and returned to my seat. Afterward, her sarcasm continued, but I managed to get her to learn the basics. It's still a long road ahead. Even though they were basics, it included minor things like detailed computer operations and types of documents. I sat on a bench installed on the office rooftop drinking canned coffee during the break to soothe my exhausted body. While thinking about my future, I suddenly received a call from an unknown number on my smartphone. Hello? Is this Nancy? This is Saveview Hospital. Your mother was urgently transported here, but she's in a critical condition. Can you come right away? My mind went blank, and I couldn't remember much afterward. I left an early leave notice on her desk first and caught a taxi to the hospital. Upon arriving at the hospital and explaining the situation at the reception, a nurse guided me to where my mother was.
Mom, this can't be true.
There lay my mother, with a beautiful and gentle expression, asleep. According to the doctor, my mother had collapsed at her workplace. By the time she arrived at the hospital, they were in a state of believing in miracles. Indeed, my mother's heart wasn't strong since the past. Yet, the symptoms were stable, and there were no issues during regular checkups, but the mental strain since my father passed away might have affected her, perhaps. For a time, I sobbed, hugging my mother tightly. After coming home with my mother, as the funeral date has been set, I called female manager to ask for my first ever paid leave. I'm sorry for leaving early today and causing trouble. My mother just passed on, so could I take about a week off for the funeral and all the other stuff that comes with it?
Oh, so that's why you left early when I wasn't around? It was an emergency with my mother.
Her cold and harsh tone hit hard, considering how down I was. I won't approve any paid leave for you. I couldn't believe my ears.
In the 10 years I've been here, I've never taken a day of paid leave.
So what? I've contributed so much to this company, so shouldn't I be able to take paid leave to say goodbye to my mother?
You always challenge me. You don't need to come back.
Having been told this, even I had reached my breaking point.
Are you really sure? I'll take you up on that offer.
She started ranting, but I unilaterally cut the call without a second thought. The funeral went smoothly. I couldn't just sit grieve, and I kept myself busy, handling various tasks and sending out thank you notes to those who'd been so kind. Took my mind off things for a bit. She tried reaching out multiple times, but I ignored every attempt. A bit later, I got a call from the president, so I made my way to the office after 2 weeks. I walked straight to the president's office. On my way, I bumped into 2 coworkers who consoled me. "I'm sorry, but I'm going to the president's office first." Their kindness made me feel a bit better. "It's Nancy. May I come in?" After knocking and asking permission, I was let in promptly.
Hey there, been a while. Heard you've been out of touch for 2 weeks. Doesn't sound like you.
My apologies. You see, I laid out everything, not sugarcoating how she had been treating other employees and myself. Hearing negative stuff about his own daughter must have hurt him, but the president listened to every word. I apologize for my daughter's actions. To be honest, my wife and I spoiled her, and this is the outcome. No worries. I think my parents must have felt the same way as parents. Seeing my awkwardness, the president smiled gently.
Nancy, you're truly a wonderful lady. My daughter's situation was my judgment error. I've spoken to those who've resigned in the past 2 weeks. I can't apologize enough for that.
To the best of my knowledge, this was the first time I'd ever seen the president looking so troubled. Ever since you stopped coming to the department my daughter works in, things have gone haywire. Just the other day, the entire team staged a group protest. Really? I had no idea things had escalated that much. So, what are you going to do about it? The president wore a sad expression for a moment but quickly returned to the person I knew. So I need your help. It's easy for me to have my daughter resign, but that alone won't satisfy all employees. Can you help us? Looking into the president's earnest eyes, I made up my mind. Understood. I'm more than happy to assist. And so, the sanctions against her began. Hey, how long do you plan on taking time off? The exasperated female manager finally reached out. Wasn't it you who told me not to come in? It's strange, I'm just following your orders.
Don't give me that. We're in chaos here. Get to the office now.
Reluctantly, I changed into my work clothes and headed to the office. However, there wasn't a single employee present. It was eerily quiet, just like working on a weekend. It's a weekday today, right? Feels weird. It was when I muttered to myself in an empty office. I heard yelling from a woman and the sound of something being thrown from my department. Peeking cautiously inside, I saw her causing a ruckus. What's going on? I called out from behind her. She swiftly turned and grabbed at me.
It's all your fault. Ever since you stopped coming, everyone else followed suit. Now I can't get in touch with anyone. How will you make up for this?
I'm not quite following. Can you please not shift the blame? I calmly told her. She let me go and pushed me away. Such an infuriating woman. Even my father won't help. What's going on? How long has it been since everyone stopped coming?
Half a day. Because of that, I've been handling calls which I've never done, and I have no clue what to do anymore.
The slumped figure of her was pitiful. Her hair was a mess, and the nail polish that she wouldn't remove despite numerous reminders was now chipped. She must have hung her jacket somewhere. There were noticeable frays here and there on her jacket. Seeing her, who had always acted like a queen, now in such a state, I couldn't help but laugh. Serves you right. What did you say? This is on you. What did you think of everyone?
No one's going to follow someone who just waves their power around without any real skills.
As I firmly told her, she approached with her face turning red.
Say that one more time. You really want to be banned from the company?
Well, I'd like to stay if you resign.
Well then, you're fired.
I'll be taking over this company. What a pity for you. Too bad. She was wearing an eerie smile, and for some reason, she had a triumphant look on her face. I answered, all right. It was a short time, but thank you very much. It must have been an unexpected reaction. She had her eyes wide open in surprise. You do realize you're fired, right?
Of course. Now I should pack up my things.
I carefully made my way to my desk, avoiding the papers scattered on the floor. Once there, I started pulling out stuff from the drawers. Wait. Are you really quitting? Yes, why? I asked, tilting my head. Well, shouldn't you at least finish up today's work? Her earlier confidence had disappeared, and she seemed desperate. Do you know that it's illegal to reject a properly justified paid leave request without a valid reason? Huh? It's a violation of labor laws, you know. It's mandated by law. Her face turned ashen. She was clearly in turmoil, but I continued. We're all human. I understand there are compatibility issues. But that doesn't mean you should drive people into a corner. You're unfit to be a manager. Makes me wonder what your folks are like.
Who the hell do you think you are? Insulting my parents like that? You're not getting off easy.
Well, you insulted my parents too, so you're not getting off easy either. She, shaking with rage, tried to put on a brave face.
Our worlds are entirely different. Don't lump me with you.
You're really despicable. I heard you said the same thing and drove those who left into a corner.
That's right. They treated me like I was worthless, so I drove them into a corner as far as I could. Felt so refreshing when they were gone.
I sighed deeply, shifting my gaze to the corridor. Curious, she followed my gaze, muttering, "Father? Why are you here?" There stood the president. As the president stepped into the department, he walked directly to her. Father, there's been a misunderstanding.
No need for explanations. I've got evidence of your deeds.
No, they just envied me for my skills and set me up. I did nothing wrong. The president lashed out at her, who tried to justify her actions.
You idiot. Because you're so incompetent, I was hoping the competent employees would reform you. Yet under your lead, in the past few months, our performance plummeted and even caused losses to the company.
But you made me a manager, so that means you had faith in me, hadn't you? I promise I'll meet your expectations this time.
No. If I didn't give you a position, you'd have run away.
The president's imposing demeanor made her buckle.
I never even thought of letting you take over the company. This time for sure, I'll transfer you to the countryside to reform you from the ground up. Please, have mercy.
Look who's talking. We'll get constant updates from your new location. And the folks there are pretty reliable, so brace yourself. Turning pale, she lay on her back, crying and laughing hysterically. I chirped, "Too bad." With a bright and cheerful voice, I said that to her. Later that day, without anyone to see her off, the former female manager left the company. The next day, the employees, enjoying the day off declared by the president, returned to work jubilant. With the departure of the former female manager, peaceful days were restored, and smiles returned to the employees' faces. Meanwhile, the former female manager started from scratch in a rural town where there were no conveniences or entertainment. There, her family's influence didn't matter, and she was strictly schooled by her colleagues every day. As the days passed, she began to change, and finally, she started to speak respectfully and became receptive to feedback from others, as reported by the president. The most surprising thing was receiving an apology call from her. At first, I listened to her, but at the end of the call, she begged, "I've reflected enough. I want you to ask the president to let me return." Of course, my answer was no. I ignored further calls and blocked her number. The president personally contacted those who had resigned due to her and invited them back. As a result, the company's performance quickly recovered, even surpassing its previous state. As for me, I was sitting in the seat of the manager, which became vacant after she left. When the president personally appointed me, everyone in the department was even happier than I was. While the managerial job is tougher than I imagined and I am a bit overwhelmed by my sudden career move, with the support of the employees, I am doing well. Having been both physically and mentally hurt, especially with burns, I have been compensated with settlement money deducted from the former female manager's salary, which has been added to my own pay. Thanks to that, my life has become very comfortable.
Recently, my boyfriend of 2 years proposed to me, and I am over the moon.
We are expecting a child next year, and both of us are excited. Even though I have just entered my second trimester, we are already fully prepared for the birth.